structural in business is the integration of all functions. That means you have to understand what each function does and what it provides and why it's important and how to utilize it. It's a big shift. So this is all well and good, right? But I'm a pastor nowadays. And so I've looked at this and I go, how would I apply this to ministry? I have a business, a leadership pipeline in business. But what would it look like in ministry? So I developed what I call, forgot this. The red dots are transition points. And at those transition points, that's when your mind has to change. If you do not change your mind at those transition points, you'll never grow into the new position. Okay? And when I'm coaching people, what I often find is people operating in their old way of doing things in a new position. And they can't figure out why they're frustrated. It's because no one ever told them, hey, you got to change your thinking a little bit here. Okay, so what I did then was I applied this to a ministry pipeline. So I changed the word. But there's some other differences, though. You think about the individual contributor. Individual contributor becomes an individual member. And then you look at the manager or supervisor, and we have different names for this, but it's basically a leader, maybe a small group leader, something like that in a church or a ministry. And then the manager of managers becomes maybe a ministry director. Ever heard of people like this? Yeah? And then the ministry director, maybe the business manager becomes what? A pastor. And it's interesting because a lot of pastors are there because they started as fantastic individual contributor teachers. And they keep teaching. They get promoted to become a leader. And guess what? They keep teaching. Then they go up to be a ministry director, and guess what? They're still teaching. Then they become a pastor, and they do what? They teach. And they never trained on how to change from level to level. And so what happens? The board comes in and fires the pastor. That's what happens. The board's unhappy with what's happening administratively because the pastor's never been trained. So this is a ministry pipeline. So now that we've kind of done this, my question for you. And Pat's got a handout that he's going to pass around if you don't have it already. You already have it? Okay, so take a look at that. So now you have that. I'm going to go to question 1. I want you just to look at it and think about which arrow best represents your present position. So look at it. Where are you at? Go ahead, tell me. Individual contributor. Yes?
How soon, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, how soon do you have to make the pivots when you recognize this? As soon as possible, but...
I think that's really a God timing thing. When the Holy Spirit really is on you to say, it's time for you to make the pivot, you make the pivot. And that goes into other areas of discipleship where it's recognizing God's voice when he's telling you to do that. And there's some practical things that you can do to develop the ability to listen to God's voice when you make those kinds of turns. So that's what I would say. The timing of it, for some of us it comes really fast, it comes really late. I think there's no guidelines to it, but there is the fact that when you make the pivot, you gotta change your thinking. You have to. What worked before will not work in the future. Yeah?
What are the consequences of not making the pivots at the right time?
Oh, then you're in trouble with God. I mean, to say it facetiously. This morning I was talking about, at my church, I was talking about hearing the voice of God, and to know when you need to make a change like that. But some of us, we struggle because we don't make the change because we cannot recognize God's voice. And so I said, okay, think about Moses. When was the first time Moses heard the voice of God? Burning bush. Right? And how about the second time Moses heard the voice of God? Was there a burning bush? No. So what happened was God knew, I need to do this thing so Moses will come and then I speak to him and then he can recognize that that's what my voice sounds like. So after that, I don't need that burning bush thing. I can speak directly. Now Moses can hear my voice. And I think for many of you, can look back on your life, and maybe it's recent, where there was some event, some burning bush in your life. Health issue, work crisis, family crisis, maybe some spectacular success. And in that moment, you heard unmistakably the presence of God in your life. That's God's voice. And learning to recognize that, then, you won't need those big events to keep understanding God's voice. Is that making sense? When we go look at this Old Testament and we look at Moses, after the burning bush, he hears God's voice, and then he starts doing all these crazy things, right? And then it shows after a while that they go off into the promised land, he's in the tabernacle, he goes in the tabernacle, and he speaks to God as if face to face. Because he knows how to recognize God's voice. He's practiced it. So there may be some things, in other words, as we focus on, let's say you're an individual member in a ministry, and you're thinking about growing, one of the best ways to grow in ministry is to learn and to recognize God's voice. You think about Matthew chapter 28, verse 18 and 20, which is the Great Commission. Jesus said, go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, right? Baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and teach them to obey everything that I've commanded. So there's a sense that disciples hear and obey. And so this part of hearing is something we have to develop. But not just to hear and to learn, but to hear so we can obey. To hear so we can perform acts of service. It all kind of ties together like that. I know, I just kind of gave you a $3 answer to a 4-cent. Okay. So, where are you on the map? Who's individual contributors? Okay. How many managers, supervisors do we have? How many managers of managers do we have? How many business owners do we have? Ooh, yeah, baby. There you go. Different. If I were to stand up here and give you skills and they're only applied to individual contributor, then there's some of you are going to go, oh, it doesn't apply. So in order for us to help build people, to build up the church, we have to know where they are on the journey. And where they are on the journey, then we can customize our equipping of them. Is this making sense? Yeah? So now you can figure out, okay, where am I on the pipeline? Okay, so that's question one. So, now, let's see. Question one. Okay, every phase has different time applications, work values, and skills. These are the broad generalizations of what needs to change in your mind when you go from one phase to the next. Time applications is how you spend your time. Just how do you spend your time? And it changes when you go from one phase to the next phase. The second thing is work values, not personal values, but work values. What is most important in the new phase? What's the highest priority work that you have? You have to make a change. The last one is skill sets. And most of us will think of skill sets, and that's immediately what we think, oh, when I go from phase to phase, I have to change my skill sets. Yeah. That one we seem to be more open to. But a change in skill sets without a change in time application and without a change in work values is still going to lead to failure. Time application, work values, and skills. So, like I said, one of my first jobs was I was an accountant. I was a general ledger accountant. And I knew my role was to do the close every month. And then after that, do the bank reconciliations, when they came in, and do the account analysis. And that was my world. And I was very happy in that until it got boring. And that happened after 3 months. And my supervisor was looking at me like, oh, he better not, I can't keep this guy here because he's already getting bored. And I was fortunate, the finance director said, oh, you have background in finance. Come on over to financial analysis. That's how I journeyed over financial analysis. But in financial analysis now, it was a different role. Now, instead of running a close, I had to now coordinate with different functions. It was different. I had to go talk to these people and talk to these people and get information. And I realized that, one of the changes I have to make is I need to make sure I set aside, I don't have to do a monthly close anymore where I set aside, the first 3 days of the fiscal month. I know I'm going to be here till midnight doing the close. I don't have to do that anymore. My time application is different. Now what I need to do is I need to set aside time to go out and meet the different departments. There's a change in time in how I use my time. And then change in work values. My work values, because as an accountant, I loved it when it balanced. When the GL said 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, right? That was the goal. And you get there, and you hear angels sing, and you hear, and there's fireworks going off, and you go, I can go home. That's what happened. Financial analysis, it changed. Then my work value had to be, I need to find the decision maker and help the decision maker. Because that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to help decisions be made. And so I had to build relationships with the decision makers so they could trust me and I could trust them and I could understand their needs. And then I had to develop skills like, as an accountant, I didn't have to talk to anybody. As a financial analyst, eventually I was talking to people on Wall Street. So I had to be able to communicate and be able to say things without really saying things. Different skills. But I never went to financial analysis skills training. You kind of have to figure it out on your own. But that's what I love about the pipeline. With the pipeline, we can step back and anticipate what things you may need to learn. And you can evaluate yourself and think, what am I struggling with? What are people in this role? How are they being successful? What's causing me not to be as successful? What things do I need to learn? And every phase is different. I became a senior manager at a high-tech company, and the next step was to be I was already a manager, but the next step was to become like a functional manager. And I remember at that point, I hit a ceiling. Because I looked around our company, and I didn't like the people at that level. I thought they were all so political. And so I kind of pushed off against that. I didn't engage in all the parties or go, social events. I kind of pushed off against that. Well, wouldn't you know it? I hit a glass ceiling. I couldn't be promoted anymore. Why? Because I didn't realize that the next level requires the ability to work cross-functionally if you're going to be a functional manager. If you cannot work cross-functionally, the executives can see it and they go, "We can't do it. We're not going to promote him up." And I thought I was being righteous by avoiding politics. When in fact what was happening was I blinded myself to the reality of what was happening. That was a huge lesson for me. Because I realized that a lot of times what prevents us from growing is our own biases and assumptions about what it takes to get there. And because of that, then we reject growing. And when we reject growing, guess what? We don't grow. But if we can step back and look at the pipeline and try to be a little bit dispassionate about it, we can see that, oh, the reason there's that, in my case, politics, because people need to learn how to work cross-functionally. They need to, and the way they understood that was this kind of, what I call sleazy kind of thing. But now knowing what I know, now I go,